You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
All right, everyone, thank you for coming. Can you hear me? No. It just records. It doesn't record. Wow. I've done this many times, so you can tell. Thank you for coming to, I'm going to call this special joint meeting with Public Services and the Ways and Means Committee to order. It is 7 p.m. I'll call roll for Public Services. You can call roll for Ways and Means. Representative Dayhill. Here. Representative Adams.
Present.
Representative Nupane.
Here.
Representative Sharkey.
Here.
Representative Papalizio.
I am here.
Representative Shrestha.
Here.
And Adrian Bonenberger, Chair, I am present.
And for Ways and Means, Representative Black.
Here.
Representative Brooks.
Yes.
Representative Hines.
Here.
Representative Waterman.
Here.
And I'm John Hartwell, the Chair of Ways and Means. So we are all here.
All right, well, we have one agenda item before us today, and that is to consider and act on the following resolution, which is available to the public on the town's website. I will read it now. A resolution amending resolution authorizing an appropriation of $325,000 for the police headquarters renovation project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $325,000, therefore, to increase the scope of the project and increase the appropriation and bond authorization therein by an additional $20 million. The bond resolutions approved by the Board of Finance have been circulated to all committee members, I hope. Thank you so much to the police department and the architects for attending to answer questions and give us a presentation. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve, that we recommend to full RTM approval of said thing.
And I will
Any
second that.
Any discussion?
We have a discussion in the back.
Can we get a presentation?
You can't hear me? Okay.
Let's try that.
So let's begin with a presentation from the police department and the architects as they're here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And please introduce yourselves.
Yep, I'm Deputy Chief John Alves from the Police Department.
No, they're good. Oh, really?
Let's just agree to walk the mic around, because that includes everyone here.
I'd like to start by saying, thank you for coordinating the two committees tonight. Make the process a little easier. We appreciate that.
Is it on?
Is this on?
It might not be. I actually.
Okay.
That's good.
Deputy Chief John Alves, thank you again for coordinating the two committees tonight for the presentation. With me is architect Brian Humes from Chukunski Humes Architects, to my right. We have the Downs team with us as well, Jeff Anderson, Brad Anderson, Ryan Patrick, Chief Mulder, Peter Bonka is here. He's the chair of the Public Building Commission, and several police commissioners. Thank you for attending as well. So I was going to start my presentation with just a quick overview of the project and how we got to this point. Most RTM members did come out and tour the building. A lot of those tours lasted between an hour and a half and 2 hours long. So there was a lot of detail given about the deficiencies of the building that we went over. So I'm not going to spend time going through the PowerPoint, which is attached to your agendas, which shows some of those deficiencies to the public. However, we will focus tonight's presentation on the remedies for those deficiencies. So again, a brief overview of how we got here. 2019, well, we've had historically high levels of moisture throughout the police department, especially on the lower level of the building. In 2019, we had hired Hoffman Architects to conduct a slab moisture investigation study. The study came back that there was high moisture transmission rates through the slab, like in an unacceptably high level, where you wouldn't even put product down on the floor to contain, or for flooring. Flooring doesn't even belong on it based on the rates that were coming through. So the fix then is to remove everything from the lower level of the police department. Lockers, all equipment, everything. Pull up all the flooring throughout the police department, blast it all down to bare concrete, and do what's called negative side waterproofing to hold down the vapor. So seeing that, we knew this is going to be a large-scale project and a major disruption to our daily operations at the police department. We're going to have to move out. But also we had another glaring issue looking at us, which is our cell blocks. They're just outdated. And you've seen the cell blocks. It's a huge footprint within the building. They're outdated. There's no fire suppression within our cell blocks, so we've had fires in them when people sneak into the cell blocks with lighters in their privates and they light things on fire, and we have human beings locked up in the cell blocks with no fire suppression. So that was just one thing that we said, well, you know, we need to renovate these cell blocks. Secondly, our women, they now occupy a large percentage of our police force, and they're outgrowing the women's locker room. On top of that, we had the leaky roof. Our windows are original to the building, 30 years old, so they need replacement. We have a failing HVAC system. Need to reallocate space on our main floor. We would like to expand our dispatch capacity. Our generator needs replacement. Elevator's outdated, beyond useful life. And we have major site issues, including parking and security, to address. So years ago, some funds were being set aside for these capital projects. Some funds, and not a considerable amount of money. Probably not enough money to take care of a lot of these projects. However, we did decide that we're going to reallocate that money for a feasibility study to see, you know, to do a needs assessment. And in October of 2021, Brian Humes was hired by the town to perform the feasibility study. So that included needs assessment, schematic design, and cost estimated services. So our vision was to address all the major issues as one large bonded project, interrupt our operations one time, and then present the town with a solution for the next 30 to 50 years where we won't have another issue at the police department where we need to come to the RTM to ask for additional funding. So in the fall of 2022, Jakunski Humes, they were contracted at that time for design development. That was after they had finished the feasibility study and needs assessment. And at that time also, Downs Construction was chosen as construction manager for the project with oversight of the Public Building Commission. So that was after vetting out several RFPs for construction manager from several different companies. So between the fall of 22 and November of 23, that 1 year period, this project's design development phase was completed with significant input and oversight from the Public Building Commission. So in November of 23, Downs Construction provided us with the design development set and cost estimate summary, which this resolution is based on. So also in November, both the Public Building Commission and the Board of Police Commissioners voted in favor of the estimate summary and the timeline as provided by Downs Construction. And it's just important for me to note that the Public Building Commission is a team of professionals. They put a considerable amount of time into this project. They represent the fields of construction, architecture, finance, law, and design. They provided insight and oversight of the project with the best interest of the town in mind, you know, as this project developed. So I'd like to start with that and then pass it to Brian Humes.
Thank you and good evening. Brian Humes, Jakunski Humes Architects. We're based out of Berlin, Connecticut, and the reason that we were brought on board for this project was our extensive experience doing police facilities. Police and public safety has been the concentration of my efforts for the last 38 years. Over that time, we've been involved with over 90 public safety and police facilities. So it includes renovation work, it includes new construction. Just as a quick glimpse, the facilities that we've been involved with only in the last 25 years is on this chart in Connecticut. We also have an extensive experience throughout Massachusetts. So I'm proud of these boards, but that's not the reason why I'm showing them to you. I'm showing them to you just because we're bringing that level of expertise to your community. And looking at your facility with that expertise in this building type. When I was first called to take a look at this building, it was 2021. And I can remember when Branford built the police department. In my career, it was built, and the way that the town went about the construction of that facility in 1994 was a design-build effort. I don't know if you're familiar with that delivery method, but the town elected at that time to construct it as a design-build project. In that process, they hire a general contractor, and the general contractor then hires the architect, and the architect is working for the general contractor. They make decisions for the building based on a price that's been established, and the contractor has to deliver the project for that price, working with their design professionals, and so they make decisions for the construction of the building. I was surprised when I get a call to say there's a building that was constructed in 1994 and you're looking to do renovation. Primarily when I get a call, these facilities are much older and the need is much greater and they're running out of square footage and you have to expand or you have to build new. And so this for me was a unique experience to get a building that was less than 30 years old that needed renovation work done to it. So I went down to look at the building, and when you look at the building from the outside, and even when you walk into the front door, you're not really seeing a building that needs extensive renovation. So when we were first hired, the first thing I did in my scope of work, and what I always recommend, is to do a space needs assessment. I wanted to evaluate for the town if the size of the building was meeting the future needs of the department. Sometimes we go into these municipalities and they need a building 2 times their current size or 3 times their current size, just because they're so crammed in the building or they've outlived the building. They need more square footage. When I conducted my space needs assessment, I interview the police department, we find a specific, what are the needs, such as detention. What do you see the need is for how many detention cells do you need? What's the future growth potential in the building, in the department? What do you need for parking spaces? So we talk about the needs of the interior and we talk about the needs of this site. We concluded our space needs assessment with the requirement of 24,500 square feet. Surprisingly enough, your existing building is 24,500 square feet. So right there, that told us for a 30-year growth potential in the department, your existing square footage was serving the community. But the way it was configured was not serving the operational needs of the department. They had way too many cells based on their needs. They had not enough officer wellness areas. They had inadequate female facilities because in 1994, it was a different generation. It was mostly male dominated, but today it's not. So the building needed to get reconfigured, but the square footage of the total complex was adequate. So that told me, and I conveyed to the town, this is actually good news. You're not talking about a major addition to this building, you're not talking about a new construction, but you are having to address some deficiencies and those deficiencies primarily were in the lower level. We did more research into the construction of the building, and we uncovered documents in the town hall that indicated at the time there was no vapor barrier placed underneath the slab, the concrete slab. Any construction manager, any general contractor, any architect today would say that's a major failure. But there was documentation where the architects and the engineers did not recommend placing a vapor barrier under the concrete slab. No one would write that letter today. That's the source of what the entire project stems around. There's no vapor barrier. We've since had cores taken of the concrete slab. We've had the cores taken out and analyzed for their chemistry and the makeup of the concrete. We've sent those samples out to the manufacturer of mitigation products. They've evaluated the chemistry and the analysis of the concrete. And we're 100% confident that we have a solution for the slab. There are products today that will solve the problem that you have in the lower level. But as the deputy chief said, we have to get to the entire slab to make it effective. To get to the entire slab, we're now having to take up existing flooring, we're having to shot blast existing epoxy flooring, and if you're gonna go to that extent, it only makes sense that we renovate the lower level to get it back to its operational efficiencies based on the space needs assessment that we conducted in our initial step. So we put together schematic plans on how we can renovate the lower level. We were at that time considering this to be a phased construction approach where the police department could vacate the lower level, they could move up to the first floor. We would then have contractors take over the lower level and do all the construction. We would then go upstairs and try to do some reconfiguration of the upstairs to make it more efficient. So we were still considering at this time performing all this work while the police department was occupying the building. Now we took also a look at the site. This diagram shows you existing conditions of the site. The site has also some deficiencies. Laurel Street is to the bottom of the sheet, and Laurel Street is a two-way traffic. Harrison Avenue is to the top of the sheet, and Harrison Avenue is now one-way traffic going away from Main Street. If the public pulls into this site and finds that they don't have adequate parking for public, the public then migrates as their only choice, migrates to the rear of the building and migrates into the area's staff parking. What's also is happening with the community services, volunteer community services building, is the activity within that building. People are coming in, if there's an empty space, they're taking it on what should be the staff parking area, the fleet parking. When shift change happens every day at a regular time frame, the patrol cars all come back to the facility, staff changes, patrol cars have to stay there until new staff arrive, and then the staff that's going off shift could then get in their vehicles and vacate the site. So you can see what's happening regularly twice a day is there's a large concentration of staff and police vehicles needing that access to that space, and you have public vehicles also trying to come through and sometimes taking available space. So it's a very, very inadequate situation that's happening to the rear of the facility. We need to clean that up. Police staff should have access to parking, and police vehicles should be protected. There's incidences of public taking out aggression on staff vehicles within police facility parking areas. It has camera surveillance, but there's still a concern for the protection of staff and the protection of their vehicles while they're sitting there, while they're on duty. There needs to be space for the patrol cars to come back and get into the site and get off the site. But when they have to leave the site, they have an option of coming up the side of the building to get to Laurel, which is a one-lane drive. So if they're facing cars going down, they can't get back to Laurel. If they get off the site onto Harrison, their only option is to take a left-hand turn, and that's taking them away from the central business district. So any response to the central business district would have to be out and around. It's not a real efficient response path if something was to happen in an area they need to get to quickly. So I'll stay with the site for a little bit, and I'll explain that for the site, we've now given, using the same site area, we've now given an ability for public to come into the site off of Laurel, circulate in front of the building, expand the area of public parking, and if there's no parking, that the public has the ability to then exit back onto Laurel and not go back into the back of the facility. We would have a gated access here, so staff would have ability to get through the gate. And this other exit has been established from the lower level, so if there has to be a response to get to the central business district or downtown area or Main Street, they have the option of not just going to Harrison, but this would be a one-way out and then back to Laurel so they could get back to Main Street. There's another gate that's being proposed in the rear. So we understand and we've given access to the loading dock for the volunteer community services, the food pantry. We're not looking to impact any of the existing functions that are happening within the food pantry or the dining room. They still have access to the loading dock for loading and unloading, but there'll be another gated area so those vehicles cannot continue into the staff parking area. We've added a carport structure, and the carport structure is for the fleet vehicles. It used to be that carports were just to keep the snow and ice off the vehicles. But now you're investing a lot of your money into putting electronics into these cars. And all the vehicles have a lot of electronics and computer-aided equipment within the vehicles. They cannot leave those vehicles running when they're doing shift change, and they have to leave the windows up because of what's inside of them. So summertime cabin temperatures, if you leave those cars out under the sun, in the summertime cabin temperatures would exceed the temperatures that are regulated for all the equipment that you've invested within the vehicles. So we're trying to keep summertime sun off the vehicles, but also we're trying to keep snow and ice. Because when officers need those vehicles, they need to get to those vehicles, they need to respond. They don't need to wait to get the snow off, the ice off, and then respond. So we've placed a carport structure in the middle of the rear area. The rest of the spaces would be available for staff, would be fenced. But it provides that shift change opportunity for them to come to the site, find a parking space while that shift is changing and then leaving. There's another cut through that's established to the rear of the community services building. That would be gated on both ends, and the area in the middle would be used for vehicle impound. They also need to be responsible about anything that comes on the site that needs to be retained for evidence. They don't have the ability to do that now. Evidence is very key for the department and the community to make sure that evidence is properly handled, properly stored. This is a legal issue that the courts are looking for that all of this evidence is handled properly. And the evidence could be of any size. It could be a vehicle. It could be anything that's part of a crime that the police have to retain for evidence. So we've provided on the site a proper area to store that and to provide surveillance for that. So that's kind of the basics of the site and the site improvements and why these are necessary. I just wanted to give you some include as to why we're doing this, why we're recommending this. When we were concluded our feasibility study in June of 2022, we were at a schematic design level. So we had diagrammatic plans for both floors. We were looking to meet the space needs assessment in a way that we thought could be phased. We were at a project that was $10 million for the renovation and about $1.2 million for the firearms training range. We had the firearms training range in our feasibility study as an ad alternate. And the reason that we had the firearms training range is because the range is operational now. They don't really have range equipment in there. They don't utilize it as point and shoot other than for training purposes, but the firearms training range for the police department is situational training. It's not just how to use a firearm, but it's how not to use a firearm. It's not when you need to use it. It might be when you don't want to use it. So it's situational training that they do within the firearms training range. Firearms proficiency for the police department is something that you provide to the department, but it's lacking in a lot of other departments in Connecticut. I think you're fortunate that you've provided this space for your police department to train properly in firearms proficiency. You should be complimented for that. To do it properly, there's lead involved, and that lead has to be evacuated, filtered, and the mechanical systems for that are very important to keep that range operational. The mechanical systems are on the roof of the range, and the range is located, if you haven't seen it, it's in the neighboring building to the rear. Now the mechanical systems are working, and the range is being utilized, but the mechanical systems are at their useful life. We don't know when they will fail, but we know they're at the end of the useful life. There's also evidence of moisture intrusion and some paint peeling. We have remedies for this. So we put that in as an alternate. So we concluded our feasibility study. The town looked at this, and it was only after the feasibility study that we were then engaged again to do design development. That's when the town also engaged us with the building committee, and the town engaged Downs Construction as a construction manager. So two things happened there. They took the feasibility study, we presented it in its totality with the schematic design solutions to the building committee. We also presented it to Downs Construction in a schematic way. There was a feeling from the building committee and the town that we're at a project now that we really should be looking at doing this once and doing it right and not have to come back again. So it expanded the scope to include things such as replace the elevator. See, everything now is going to be 30 years old. Mechanical systems are 30 years old. The elevator's having problems right now, and they're having service problems with the elevator. It's 30 years old. The roof is 30 years old. Everything is at the useful life. And shouldn't we be doing all of that now while the police department are being inconvenienced, instead of inconvenience them now and then a year from now and 2 years from now and 3 years from now? Let's just inconvenience them once and do the projects that we know have to be done just because of useful life. Up to that point, we had not considered any exterior real exterior improvements. We are replacing windows. The windows are old. We're recommending that you put new windows in with impact-resistant glazing. This now, according to the state of Connecticut, is an essential facility. The state of Connecticut determines every police facility in the state, and they categorize that as a essential facility for its risk category. What the state and what the building code is saying to these municipalities is if you have a natural disaster, these buildings have to survive the natural disaster. These are essential for public safety, they're essential for emergency response. Other buildings that are essential facilities are hospitals, fire stations. These are the facilities that you want to have maintain their services through any natural event. So we have to make sure these buildings are hardened. They have increased wind load requirements, snow load requirements, seismic requirements. So you're making these buildings more robust than just any other building in town. Impact-resistant glazing, not just because we're along the shoreline, this is an essential facility. We don't want anything to happen here that would hinder their ability to respond. I get back to the design-build approach. There were some other construction-related things within the building that we felt were not done properly under that construction approach. We need to resolve some of that. One of those issues, for example, is if you walk up to the front door and you get to the front door and you're standing at the front door, you're looking down and you have a lot of cracked sidewalks, cracked concrete. But what you don't know is what you're standing on is the ceiling of the locker room below. The locker room extends under the front plaza. So when that cracks are visible, the water's getting in, and the water is now dripping down into the locker rooms. The ceilings are all stained, the ceilings are wet. There was an attempt to put a membrane on that under the sidewalk to keep the water from migrating into the basement. That's failed, so we now take that up. So we are already doing site work on that site. Now's the time to look at that membrane, but we also have developed a way to provide a greater covering over that sidewalk so it's not taking direct snow, direct water. We can get that water away so you're not going to have an issue like you have 30 years. We want to make this a 50-year plus building. So that's increased the cost. That's how we've gone from a project that was 12 million to now you're looking at 20 million. You're also looking at the increase of cost because what's happened in the construction industry with construction costs and escalation costs since 2021, 2022. It's been unprecedented. For the last 3 years, we've been chasing budgets because municipalities, if it waits too long, the budgets don't hold and the costs are going up. I'm going to turn this over if you have questions about costs to Downs Construction because our responsibility in the project is to define scope. It's then the construction manager's responsibility to estimate costs. But I can tell you that the reason the costs have escalated is because escalation is real and inflation's happened. So I'm going to wrap up by telling you where we are today. Today, we have completed a design development phase project. So for design development, what that means in an architectural term is we've completed the architectural solutions and the engineering solutions and the civil engineering solutions for this facility. That's been done. We've completed design development up to 100%. And that has resulted in a drawing set of 126 sheets of drawings and a specification of 2,072 pages of specifications. We have not said this project is ready to go out to bid. Design development says we have identified to the best of our ability everything defining scope. on the site, on the exterior, in the building, and even below the building. We've identified it, and we feel the scope is reflected in the cost you're seeing. We need about 12 more weeks to get the project ready for bidding, competitive bidding. We still need to cross some Ts, dot some Is. Construction document phase has not been done yet. We feel that in that construction document phase, we're increasing the details, but we're not increasing the scope. We need to make sure this is prepared for bidding, and the bid environment in the municipal market right now is pretty severe as far as if it's not on the drawings, if it's not in the specifications, you don't own it. So we have to make sure that you own it. And that's what the rest of our 12 weeks of drawings will be, with the engineering aspects, to make sure that everything is defined as much as we can for the details of whoever's bidding the project. Downs Construction would manage the bid process, but we are not prepared to give them that document set until another 12 weeks happens. And then they will have an ability to start bids and awards and start construction. So in summary, we feel with the help of the town, the building committee, and the police department, that we have defined the scope. We don't see that there's anything else that's going to impact that. But we are not done yet to go out to bid. So with that, I'm available for questions, or if we want to get into the costs.
Any questions? First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Very thorough. Covered a lot of the details in great breadth. Are there any questions from RTM members? Representative Hartwell.
Thank you very much. Pretty impressive presentation. I want to go back to something you said early on, because the number one question that I've had in my mind all along is there's water under the building. You tried remediation in the past. You didn't. Someone else did. It failed. You said in your presentation tonight that you are 100% convinced that this is going to work.
Yes.
Can you talk about why you're 100% convinced, where you see other projects that have happened like this, where a building is situated over a stream, and why it is that you think that this water is not ever going to come back up again?
Well, when you say situated over a stream, when we reviewed the documentation from Town Hall, when the building was built in 1994, there was documentation and letters written about why they did not put a vapor barrier under the slab. And the reason why they did not is because they encountered such dry conditions under the slab. They also went on and talked about how they put a gravel base under the slab, but the conditions were so dry, why would they need to put a vapor barrier? And there was even documentation as to why the vapor barrier would be a negative to put under the slab, because it wouldn't allow the concrete to dry out, because they would have a piece of plastic under it, and they wanted the concrete to dry out by having ability to breathe into the gravel base. You wouldn't write that letter to them. You would have a robust vapor barrier under that slab. And yes, the concrete would dry. But there was no documentation at that time that there was a stream or any high moisture levels under that slab. I think you are getting vapor drive. There's no question you're getting vapor drive. It's still showing high humidity, high levels of moisture in the slab, and that's because that's just naturally occurring. But there's no documentation that we found that there is a stream under the building. So if we're dealing with vapor drive, there's been a lot of technology in the last 10 years regarding this subject. And if we're going to go in there and scarify the floors, take the adhesives off, we have to shot blast that, and invariably we're then going to have to re-level that slab. So it's a self-leveling underlayment that's going to be poured on top of that slab. And in that self-leveling underlayment, there is moisture mitigation admixtures that are added to that that stops the vapor drive. And this has been documented. Manufacturers give you a 20-year warranty on it. And the manufacturer has seen the results of your core samples and have stood by their 20-year guarantee. So that's what you're getting. This is not new technology for Branford. That's going to be a first try. You're not going to be a guinea pig with this. On top of that self-leveling with the vapor mitigation admixture in it, then they test it again and make sure that it's come up to acceptable levels for adhesives and new flooring or new epoxies. But even the epoxies now, the technology that's in the epoxy flooring is no longer a hard surface that doesn't breathe. Epoxies now have breathable features to them. So they're also giving you a warranty on top of the warranty. So yeah, we're confident that we have a solution. We just need to do it.
And those warranties would repay the town for any required maintenance, renovations, whatever, in the future.
Yes, they would.
Brian, so you have had success with post-construction sealment of concrete.
We're doing it right now in New Canaan, existing building in New Canaan. They had some of the similar concerns.
Similar size building, similar construction.
It's a 100-year-old high school,
Okay.
former high school. We're renovating it for a police
So
facility.
it's nothing that is like, you pulled it out of the hat yesterday and pop a mechanic.
No, it's been tested and tried.
Okay. The other question is, in the firearm facility, is it going to be expanded or just renovated?
Just renovated.
Okay.
Just renovated. And there's no intent to put additional equipment in the range. It would be replacing the mechanical systems that are on the roof to give them new life, to make sure that the air is proper in that environment.
Thank you.
Representative Brooks.
Two questions. I'll start with maybe the deputy chief.
Speak up.
How often do you, I don't know if it's state required to qual on the various firearms you have to qual on?
Correct. So it's a state mandate of a minimum of 4 hours of training annually per each officer to maintain the certification. But we're in there a lot more often than that. And, if we have an officer that prior to the police academy, we like to get our officers in at that time to teach them the basics of using a firearm. So we use the range for that. If an officer needs remedial training, we'll use the range for that. We also use the range for our taser training, so we do that annually as well throughout the agency. So, we fire tasers in there. It's a good, safe location for taser training. So the range is just a phenomenal asset for us to have. Range time is more and more difficult to find throughout the state. For us to be able to walk into that range anytime we need it, definitely there's a major cost savings there as well, because we don't pay overtime. We don't have to change schedules. An officer's on duty, we pull them from the roster. We'll often go in and just utilize the range, which is at our disposal. And so it's been a great asset. We've been able to get some favors out of other towns. We've had other towns in there using it as well at times. So it's been great for us.
Okay, and then my second question, and I don't know if I feel like you've kind of answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I wrote it down and I can't help myself. In your opinion, let's say we did nothing. Let's say, I don't know, we do nothing. How long do you think before the building is useless to us?
Useless. That might be a hard one to answer as useless. What the building gets used for right now is police facility services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That building never shuts down. You can throw away the key to the front door. It's always open. what happens when you have a failure of a system? It impacts their operations. So it may be useful in some areas. If you were to lose a mechanical unit, you don't have redundancy right now. That goes down. If it's in the winter, they still work there. It doesn't mean they leave. It means they work under extreme conditions. They will work there under very extreme conditions if need be. They've been working there with the flooring going up and pulling up in the basement and trying to repair it and maintain it and trying different solutions. I don't think it'll ever become useless, but you will find operational deficiencies continuing to happen, and the public only sees the building from the lobby. A lot happens now in 2024 behind the lobby. As I said, I've been doing this for 38 years. It's gone from a police facility concept of brawn and muscles to a concept of brains. Never did you think it would be computer forensics going on in a police facility, but that's what they have to do today. So if they lose power, if they lose their generator, I mean, this all impacts their ability to perform their task. And all of these systems are at useful life. The generator is at the end of life. If it fails while they're trying to perform a task, or if it fails during an emergency, that just stresses the whole system.
Representative Adams.
Yeah, so thanks. So my question is, do you believe, so this building will now need extensive renovation, and you spoke well about the issues with the site and how it's squished in. There's not enough space in the site for parking and safety. So was there any consideration done to moving the police station to another site, another building? Because, you know, you're, rather than extensively renovating this site and this building.
That's a good question. Because when you're talking about a police facility within your municipality, it's not site-specific like a fire station is. Fire station is site-specific. They have to be in a certain district, and you have to have ISO ratings, and you have to be response times. With a police facility, response times are not that critical because they go off on patrols. They're patrolling your community in different patrol regions and patrol areas. They come back to the department for shift change, roll call, but then they go back to their patrol sectors and they continue to patrol. So it's not site specific. You can move the police department to another location, and this was discussed. It was discussed because the amount of renovation that we're doing, how does it compare to new construction? Well, what the police department does know is this site is a good site for them. The public has access to it, it's identifiable, the public is used to having this as a location. And the site as a location within the community, it's downtown. So the site has worked. The building has worked. So when we concluded this and we saw the price going to $20 million, we did have a serious conversation with the building committee about, you know, is this still the solution that we want to propose? So we did an analysis of new construction, depending on whether you need to acquire a site or not acquire a site. We just looked at, should it be in another location? Should they abandon this? Can we build a new facility? They can continue to work here and operate here, build a new facility and just move. It'd be less disturbance for the police department, to be honest with you, because the proposal now is they're gonna move out, reestablish at the fire station, move back. I think that a member of the building committee said it best when all of this was concluded. You will have a new facility when this is concluded. It's gonna be in the same location. It's gonna have a better site utilization, but you will have a new facility at about 70% of the cost of a new facility. So the extent of renovations that we're doing gives you another 30-plus year facility, 50-year facility for 70% of the cost of a new building. So that's why the building committee determined that this was still the proposal that should go forward. You are getting cost savings over just scrapping it and starting all over again. And the site has been a good site for the police department to operate out of and for the public to find it.
And then just to add just a couple other considerations to that as well. The tower, we have a tower worth millions of dollars in the back parking lot, which right now, you know, police, fire, public works, all those communications operate off that tower. And just the communications hardware within the building, the police department is the brains of the town. So our server room runs every other public department within the town and feeds their servers. So to move the communications infrastructure is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars right there as well. So, and then the town is still stuck with this asset that needs to be renovated and fixed. So, and we like the site too. We like being in the center of town. I just wanted to say that, and the chief and I have spoke about that. We believe we're traditional in that thought process that the police department belongs in the center of town. So we'd like to maintain that.
Representative Nupani.
Chair Nupani, RTM District 4. So I've been into police department. The situation is very critical. It's safety and health risk. So it's much needed project. Speaking of that, so it's a big time investment for the town. So 20 million is a big amount. So how, in the future, how soon are we talking about renovating again? How the durability, and if you have to repair it again, is the contractor going to be able to bear the damage, or?
Well, I've given some terms of it's a 50-year building, it's a 30-year building. So some things have different life expectancies when you put them in a new construction. We're putting in new mechanical systems. Are the new mechanical systems going to last 50 years? No, they don't. But they're going to last 20 years. Some things will last 50 years. And we've looked at this as a 20-year plus. And 20-year plus is the reason that we say that is a lot of municipalities bond for 20 years. So you want to have some assurance that your 20-year bond is going to get at least the life of the investment. But obviously a lot of these things that you're going to invest in through the bond are going to be 20 plus years. So we would anticipate that this is the last renovation that you're going to need for 20 years minimum. You're going to get a 20-year warranty on your roofing. There's some flat roof areas that are 20-year warranties. And if anything happens to your roof in that 20 years, it's warranted.
And just to follow up on your question there, Brian, we discussed North Branford and we
Yes.
discussed Wallingford.
Yes.
Cost increases on their new facilities as opposed to ours.
We have quite a few under construction right now. North Branford is not our project. Wallingford is. Actually, Wallingford is not just our project, but Wallingford is Downs Construction also. So the team you have here is currently working in Wallingford under construction. Wallingford's investing $30 million in their construction.
And that's a rehab.
It's a rehab of an existing building.
Okay, like we are.
It is, yeah.
And North Branford, I believe, is 25 without the property.
I don't have information on that. No, smaller though.
More than that?
I think it's at 15.
I was told 17.3, smaller footprint.
Okay.
I guess land acquisition was free there, but
But a smaller footprint than we have.
correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Representative Black.
yeah, I'm sorry, I probably should have been following that conversation a little more closely, but the 70% figure, you're saying that the 20 million is 70% of a new facility build new, would that include the land cost, or
No.
is that, okay? So that's, so if we were to move to a different, okay. If I could, another question. Do you have, you've got 12 weeks till we go out to bid, so 3 months. And then what's the whole timeline? Do you have a project? I'm used to seeing those bar charts with, you know, what we called in the CVs, with maybe a level 2 bar chart.
We've got bar
Okay,
charts.
I love those. But, yeah.
It's a time flow.
All right.
Pull up the CV.
All right, just have, you want to present your bar chart?
Sure, yeah.
This is a Downs construction
I mean-
bar chart.
Yeah, I'm just worried, or not worried, but, you know, interested in the timeline. I think tonight may be the first time that we're hearing we're 3 months away from bidding. We thought we were there. But, yeah, I'd be happy to look. I don't see it in the materials that were provided to us, so I don't know if that's in electronic format. Go ahead.
Yeah, we certainly have this available. Just so everyone knows, I'm Jeff Anderson, Vice President of Pre-Construction for Downs Construction. Of course, your construction manager in your project here. So as Brian described, his drawings will take another 3 months, assuming approval this evening. And towards the last month of that process of him completing the final drawings, we will begin our trade package, our bid document development, to ensure that we are structuring the project to gain as much participation as possible from the contractor market here in the state of Connecticut, using our experience, of course, in constructing these types of facilities, so that shortly after receiving those complete documents, we are ready to, as we say in layman's terms, hit the street with your project and pound the pavement to ensure that we're getting, again, as much participation as possible. Typically, that bid process takes about 4 or 5 weeks, depending on addendum that may have to come out for questions and comments and final clarifications, all towards the effort to ensure that the bids we do receive are comprehensive and complete. And then we'll take roughly 3 weeks from there to go through a detailed scope review process, which each and every low bidder on each trade package that we developed, again, to dot I's, cross T's, to make sure that all of those bids we received are, again, comprehensive and complete. So that takes about 2 months, 8 weeks after receipt of those final documents. And then after that 8 weeks is concluded, we develop what's called a guaranteed maximum price to our existing agreement that we have with the town of Branford. That includes, again, all of those low bid trade package bidders' bids, contingencies, insurance, our supervision costs, so on and so forth, so that we come back to you with a guaranteed maximum price to complete this renovation in accordance with the plans and specifications prepared by Brian. So again, about another 2 months after the documents are complete, we're coming back to you with that GMP, and within a few short weeks of that, we are commencing with construction. Now, first and foremost, we have to commence with relocation process, of course, as has been contemplated at the DD level, and then begin the paperwork process, lack of a better term, with each contractor, submittals and shop drawings, so that we can start the physical construction at the site of the PD as soon as possible after that period.
So if I could follow up. Okay, so we're talking about an award being made roughly September then?
So the bar chart I have right now is about the last week of August, first week of September, yes.
Okay, and then construction might be 2 months out from that, and since it's a lot of it's interior, you'd be doing some interior demo. I mean, we've got to move the cops out, or we'd be doing that over the summer.
So just as we complete the GMP and submitting it to the town, with the assumption, of course, that we've developed a cost that's within the budget, and that's what we intend to do. We're going to immediately meet with the chief and the deputy chief and commence with the relocation, the enabling process. So that's both off-site as currently contemplated, but also within the existing facility, because we have a phased occupied approach to some extent to the upper level and a very small portion of the lower level of the PD. And what we have currently is approximately a 13-month construction schedule with 2 months of closeout. So closeout means final paperwork, final billings, making sure that we have all of the operation and maintenance handled, so on and so forth, to be able to, in simple terms, hand over the keys to the chief and the deputy chief.
So, I'm sorry, so completion when in 2026?
Correct. Oh, no, 2020, November 2020, excuse me, November 2025.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, that's fast.
Representative Dayhill.
May I ask a question about air quality? It seems to me in this post-COVID environment, that's a very important issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed when I very kindly got a tour of the police facility, there's a lot of places where the police officers are very close to each other for quite a few hours during the day. Is there anything you're going to be able to do that would make it safer for them?
Yes, there is a code requirement for energy codes. We will be making the building a better thermal envelope, for one, but also the code in the energy code now requires fresh air. It's no longer a fresh air requirement to say open the windows, you get fresh air. We have to provide fresh air to these spaces, both supply air and exhaust air, fresh air, in addition to the heating and cooling requirement. So that fresh air requirement of the code is something that we have to do, and we will be doing. And we'll take that fresh air, we temper it before it gets to the space, but every space will get fresh air whether the windows are open or the windows are closed. And that does aid in that, just what you're talking about. It's not going to be that stale building without fresh air going to every occupied space.
Thank you.
Representative Adams.
Thank you. And just on top of that, I'm hearing glue, I'm hearing, epoxy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking off-gassing like crazy.
And we call it
Adhesives.
VOCs.
Pardon?
VOC, volatile,
Yeah.
organic
Exactly, carpeting,
compounds.
the whole bit. So talk to us about that.
The green building, really there's been a lot of emphasis on VOC and off-gassing. It happened in a lot of products, carpets, paints,
Yep.
but now, in adhesives. But now there's been a concentration of low VOC products and not having that off-gassing. So you look for products and products are readily available. Paint comes now as zero VOC. So you put your paint on the wall and you're not smelling the paint through the facility. So yeah, there is a lot of advancements in low VOC products, and those are standard in the industry now, and those will be utilized. In 1994, the adhesives, to be honest with you, were much better than they are today. They've taken
in terms of adhering.
They've
but not in
taken the
terms of low
stickum
VOCs.
out of the adhesives, is what they've done.
Yeah.
And that stickum was a lot of things you were smelling. Today, the adhesives, to be honest with you, are not as advanced as they were then, but there's no VOCs associated with them. That's also why a lot of your flooring is blowing off the concrete on the lower level, because you haven't mitigated the moisture drive. The adhesives that you're putting down to try to mitigate it are not as robust, and it just can't solve the problem just that way. You're just chasing your tail, trying to do it that way. So you have to stop the vapor drive, use the proper adhesives, and then get a manufacturer's warranty on everything from the slab up. The manufacturer sells the products for both the adhesive and the flooring product. So you're getting a total warranty, not just it was their adhesive, it was my floor. You get the products from the manufacturers, they give you that total system warranty, and there will be low VOCs.
Representative Shrestha.
The one we saw the drawing here, is that a final version of drawing, or you have better one, like alternative drawing maybe?
Yeah, we have 126 sheets of drawings.
Maybe
So
we can add more with the same budget, you know?
we have, this drawing that you're seeing here was at the conclusion of the feasibility stage. So this was our concept. And I can say that from the concept stage to the end of design development phase, the concept is still applies. But what we've added now in the 126 sheets are all the additional details to make that happen. So yeah, there are a lot more drawings available if you're interested.
Yeah, what
in
is the
seeing.
reason I'm asking, because it's like 24 years already failure. So we have to think about another like maybe 30 years. We don't
Right.
know what kind of things coming again.
Right.
Like after 25 years, we have to do more things. So better maybe we can add something there. Thinking of like farsighted.
We, with the space needs assessment, when we started this, I go all the way back to where we started the project with the space needs assessment. We've done the best we can to identify what it is for the next 20 plus years. You know, for what their needs are gonna be inside the facility and outside the facility. And I can say that the plan as developed meets the requirements of those needs. So as far out as you can tell, and we've had to project female populations. We had to project what that female staff equivalent may be 20 years from now. We're not just going to provide a female locker room for today's staff. It's going to cost you a lot more 10 years from now to renovate than it does today. We have to provide enough lockers in the female locker room, for instance, for what that future projection could be. We don't know what it is, but I do know what the trends are throughout the state. I do know what all the other departments in the state are doing for that. They are anticipating that the female populations within police facilities in Connecticut are striving to be 20%. So that's a target. A lot of them don't reach the 20% yet, but 20% is the target for Connecticut. So we're in excess of 20% in our renovation. So that's how we take standards and metrics and apply them to Branford.
Representative Brooks?
Back to dumb questions. So I lived in Branford pretty much most of my life, and I'm proud of the community I live in. And believe it or not, one of those sources of pride is when I go to the police department. I don't go a lot, but sometimes I have to go there. And the entrance is granite. And there's something to be said about that. That, you know, this is what our community to some extent was founded on. Are we gonna keep that? You're not gonna get rid of that on me.
We are not getting rid of that.
Okay.
We're not spending money getting rid of that product.
Representative Sharkey?
I'm just wondering if you're at a stop right now for completion and finalization of plans until RTM approval?
We are. We've been in a stop since we completed the design development set. And that was in the end of last year. We've been at a stop.
Representative Popolizio.
One more question, Mr. Anderson. You will be monitoring the type of material that the contractors will be using to make sure that they're all eco-friendly.
Eco-friendly, yeah.
Multifaceted. The simple answer is yes, but first and foremost is the documents will show that.
Good.
And then we'll be interviewing those contractors to ensure that it's in accordance with those documents. And then as it goes in, we have full-time supervision on site to ensure that it's proper.
And the follow-up is, will you be using a lot of local contractors on this project?
It's always our effort on projects such as this is to engage the local community as much as possible to participate and be a part of these projects for sure.
Thank you very much.
I have a question, which is a little bit more, I guess, related to the concept, which is that and everybody comes from different backgrounds. This isn't sort of, I think it's not quite an aesthetic question, but growing up, also growing up in Branford, cutting across my neighbors' lawns to go ride my bike in the supply pond, I've never been a huge fan of fences. And I'm wondering, first of all, the fences around the back and the sort of rejiggering of the fencing off of the motor pool, let's call it. Is that essential, or is that a nice to have? And then I guess in either case, how much of the $20 million nut is it?
It's a decorative fence. It's not a slatted chain link fence. It's a decorative fence. It's trying to tell to the public it's a restricted area. But we only have gates, and the gates are armed gates. The arm goes up, the arm comes down. The reason that that's the type of gate is it's quick action. It goes up in a second and a half, comes down in a second and a half. But anybody could walk through that. It's not that it's a fortress that we're developing there, but we're trying to establish a line from the sidewalk to say, please be respectful of this area behind this decorative fence. So we have a decorative aluminum fence that's going to run between gates. You can always walk through the gate. It's not that we're fortifying the back of the facility. We're trying to restrict flow and access into that area in a passive way.
It's not Fort Apache to Bronx.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I could add to that as well.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate the times we live in. We do need increased security there. We've had issues. There's been a lot of issues over the years back there, and just even in recent years. I mean, we've had different things that we're not happy about. So the fencing allows us to have higher level of site security. It's too open, unfortunately. I mean, we do have evidence back there. Anybody can walk in. We've had issues we've had female officers being stalked, things left on their vehicles. We've had mental health calls for service in our back parking lot with people running naked through the lot, people striking, causing accidents and damage to vehicles back there because there's unrestricted access. We came to work and found a box truck up against the building at one point, which was fine and harmless, but there shouldn't be a box truck pulling in and pulling up next to our police department. And when you think strategically, as a chief, about your agency, if you look nationwide, unfortunately, officers are hurt in their back parking lots. So throw it into Google, you'll see that happens. It's a place where officers can be targeted. Some of our officers have been confronted as for First Amendment audits, at the back parking lot, meaning they get out of their car on their way to work and somebody's in their face, which they've all responded appropriately, but it's just we're at a time where we need a little bit more security. It just can't be free access to anybody that decides to walk through. I mean, oftentimes we have people parking there long term. They live in the neighborhood, so it's town parking. They park their car, take up a space for long term. So it's smaller things like that add up to bigger issues for us. And so site security is definitely a major concern within this project. Thank you.
If they're Representative Earl.
So I also did the tour with the deputy chief, and going into the basement area, it's a horror show down there. There's absolutely no way that you would want people to be working in that environment. I understand entirely what you want to do. Fixing the floor, replacing the cells. The cells are a mess. Expanding the areas that people are working in, changing clothes, all of that sort of stuff. I understand that. The ground floor and walking through and talking about moving this wall and putting in a door here and literally flipping around the side of the dispatch, going to face this way instead of that way. That struck me as being perhaps not completely necessary. So the larger question here is there, if you didn't have 20 million, you had 15 million or some other number, what would be critical to the operation going forward? Realizing that you have to fix a lot of things in there and that they're expensive. And what might be considered less critical? and therefore something that could be put off for a little bit longer, so that some way we might be able to bring this price down just a little bit, because $20 million is a lot of money, obviously. So that's my question.
You want to take that one? I have a few things for it. And I understand what you're saying. And, from appearance alone, especially on that first floor level, it's not a bad looking building. So I think that our thought process is now is the time to do that. So it's space allocation that we need. One, expansion to dispatch center. That's pretty important to us. We'll get another console in there. You've heard how busy the fire department is. We can then operate with 4 dispatchers within dispatch. That's comes with a price tag, and importance for public safety. Some of the other space reallocation is because right now is the time to do it. We're within this project. We vacated the building. It's time to knock down those walls. And the major cost isn't coming from that main level. It's mainly, it's moving sheetrock and steel studs. Those are not big costs. So now it's timely. So, ultimately, there'd be a savings there to do it now. It makes sense for us. But
Yeah, I can understand the position that you're coming from, because it comes immediately back to when I first showed up. Why am I even here for a building that was constructed in 1994? Why are we talking about doing this? And it's a domino effect when you start to think about, well, if we do this, then we have to do this. Well, if we do this, we have to do this. The way the mechanical system's working in there right now, it's an air supply, air return, rooftop units, and all of the building is zoned. So you only have limited thermostats on the main floor because you have zones. So for the mechanical system, it heats and cools only to what the thermostat knows. So whoever has a thermostat, they control their temperature. But it's not controlled to the next office or the next office or the next office. They get whatever temperature they get. They don't have a thermostat. Only where the thermostat is can you adjust the temperature. It's not a system that we want to replace, to just say, or leave. There are much better, more efficient systems out there. We're introducing a system called VRF. You see them a lot in your residential use. And we can now develop a very efficient system where each room has control of their temperatures. Somebody likes it 68, somebody likes it 70, somebody likes it 72. You can provide that in a very efficient way. It heats and it cools. We are providing the fresh air that's required. But in order to do that, in order to convert the building to VRF, you have to take the ductwork out. To take the ductwork out, you have to take the ceilings down. Once you got the ceilings down, you might as well convert it to LED lighting. You get some more efficiencies and long-term effects of LED. Right now it's all fluorescence and ballasts and inefficient lighting. So since you're taking the ceilings down, we're going to put in new ceilings because we need to get new systems up into the ceiling. So all of that's coming down. New ceiling's going to go in, new lighting's going to go in because now you've installed the new mechanicals above it. You're going to have to repaint. You're going to have to do something with the flooring. If we're going to do that level of renovation, we might as well move a wall to make it a better functioning and more efficient layout and meet some of the needs they have today that they didn't have in 1994. It's getting back to, are we satisfying the space needs? Are we satisfying the 20-year potential in the facility on that floor? So we're not looking to just move walls for the sake of moving walls. It's a domino effect of everything. To get new systems, you have to take things out. You have to put things back. And that's how the project went from 12 million to 20 million. You're going to paint, you're going to put new floor finishes down. But there's not going to be a lot of changes in the walls up there. But if you're going to do it, like the dispatch center, a capability of another console, you're going to do it now. You're not going to go back later and then do all that change and inconvenience the dispatch center a second time. So it's just the nature of the building and trying to meet the 20-year growth potential of the facility.
So one more question, if I might. Generally speaking, when we bond things, we're doing that over a long-term period. Mm-hmm. And the reason is very simple. You want to match the funding to the life of the project. And that's number one, project management number one, or 101. Within this project, there are obviously lots of pieces that are going to have a long-term lifespan. My question is, are there pieces within this that have a much shorter span, which under other circumstances, you might simply just write a check for? In other words, is there a need to bond the entire 20 million? Or could we say bond, again, I'll just use a number, 15 million, 16 million, and buy some other things that are going to have a shorter lifespan and which are going to be replaceable and replaced sometime under the 20 years?
The total project cost that you're seeing is the total projected cost, hard costs, which is construction and site work, soft costs, which is other project-related expenses, and a contingency. Mm-hmm. Typically, the municipalities will not bond the project until the project is done. They have different ways of financing, but the project costs are what we're presenting. How they finance it is up to the town, whether they want to finance through bonds or whether they want to finance through capital. It still doesn't change the projected cost of the project. And yes, some municipalities say it doesn't make sense to bond for furniture or computers or some of those soft costs. The soft costs are included in that $20 million estimate. So we're trying to give you an estimate of what the project costs, not how it's going to be financed. And that's a decision that is beyond my pay grade. So,
thank you.
Absent any more questions from,
I have one question.
Please.
So if we were going to go that route and try to cut back, try to get down to 15 million, how far back does that set the project? If you had to go in and start trying to VE and pull things out to try to gain 5 million, it set you back a couple months at least, or?
yes, and I think the building committee, and I can't speak for the building committee, but I can speak of my experience with the building committee. The building committee has looked at potential VE options.
Yeah.
And this is the project that they're recommending. So
obviously, that's what I'm getting at. The 20 million is composite of all of you people getting together. So yeah. To try to go back, I'm for the 20 million. I'm not for going back and trying to redesign and trying to pull stuff out of it. And I just want to know how long it would take if you did go back through the building committee.
It would take months. At least months. Yeah, at least months. Yeah.
Representative Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a big fan of ripping out ductwork so somebody can live in 72 by 68, but my recollection from the tour that I took some time ago was that the AC and the temperature for the server room was inadequate, and maybe because of the zone, you had to have the computer needs driving the needs for at least the entire zone, if not the building. I was wondering if you could address some of that.
They have supplemented that system with a new VRF system for the server room.
Okay, so we've addressed that.
Yes.
Okay.
And that does give not only proper heating and cooling, but it also gives redundancy. Because if you have a duplicate system in there, you have a system of air for heating and cooling, you have a system of this VRF ductless split, which is in there for redundancy. So that's also something that we want to maintain. We always want to look at what's the redundancy capability of anything we're putting in. If something was to go down, do we have a redundant system to back it up?
Looks good.
Which they do now.
Looks good.
It looks like the committees are done with our questions. I'd like to open it to current RTM members. I see Representative Henschel.
Thank you.
Chairman Buttenberger, Representative Peter Henschel. I have a bunch of questions which I'll get into in a second, but I do, Brian, just to follow up on the water question. Do you have evidence in this building that there's existing functioning footing drains around it?
I don't have evidence.
Or were they indicated on the original construction documents?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they were on the documents, I still don't have evidence that they're there. So I can't tell you.
Because I would think that would be a consideration when you're looking at how the water could be, groundwater could be getting in a basement situation. But
yeah.
At any rate, I'll just leave it. I'll leave you with that one. So I do have a bunch of questions, and I'm not questioning the needs basis for this project. I think I understand, what you've gone through and what the department's gone through, and why the steps that you're recommending in the design are required. But we are being asked to approve a bond resolution in an amount that is virtually identical to, plus or minus some change, to the Downs project estimate. So my concern is that this is, since this is a phased project and involves a lot of sort of extraordinary project expenses, I want to make sure that in the estimate that we have developed, that as many of those as I can think of have been covered in some way or other, either a contingency or a line item, et cetera. Because I do want to make sure that if we do approve the bond resolution, that it is going to in fact cover the project, and that we're not going to see sort of creeping out in our upcoming town budget some line items that are accommodating things that are really project costs, but are going to show up in the town budget as opposed to in the town's project estimate. So with that said, I'm going to start with Deputy Chief Alvarez, since he's at the table right now. I'll ask the questions I have for you first, and then maybe move to Downs second. I've given the Deputy Chief my list of questions, so I'm just going to read them through, and then you can go down and answer the list. I'm going to start at the bottom of the page for the project cost. If after all said and done and Downs has gone to bid for the subcontracts for this project and determined that everything is coming in above the estimate, will your step be to then go back and look at some bits and pieces of value engineering, or will you be coming back and requesting more money for the project? That's one question. Just as a matter of sort of summarizing what I think Brian has already said in terms of the way, I've heard a lot of questions about the fact that this project, since its inception, has had a lot of scope increase, dollar scope increase, from so originally some $7 million up to where we are today. And I think I understand that pretty well, but I wanted to summarize, and you can clarify if I'm off base here, so that everybody does understand why that's happened. I think initially the project addressed only the remedial work needed to keep the current headquarters functioning, to address the things that were clearly deficient in the basement, et cetera, but essentially keeping the project itself, the facility, intact. Then obviously, since you realized that to do that, you'd have to do a relocation and move out. It made sense then to look at, now's the time, most cost efficient time to basically bring the project up to a 20, 30 year new life cycle, bring it up to date. So that, I think, amounted for another major increase in the project costs. And then the third and final piece of it is, I think, after that was all done, you were looking at some elements of the project which were basically outside of the building itself, site work, firing range, et cetera, And it said, again, if you're gonna do everything else, do it all as a package. It's probably the most efficient way of handling the project. So that would, I just would wonder whether you concur that that was basically why the project started low and ended where it did today. One specific question I have for the Deputy Chief is you're gonna be using the East Haven Jail as your jail in this period, is that correct? And so I'm assuming there are costs associated with that, and the question would be, where are those costs expended from? And the other one was you're going to be doing a relocation partially to the fire department, partially internally. Have you actually developed a real documented relocation plan, bar chart timeline of how the various elements of the relocation are going to work? Or is that relatively loose at this point? So I'll let you answer those first, and then I have another set before you answer that.
Okay.
I'll grab the, thank you.
All right, so your first question was if the subcontract bids exceed the not to exceed cap, do we plan on value engineering, or will there be a request for additional funding? My answer is we don't expect to exceed the cap. If we had to value engineer, there'd be things that we would have to value engineer. So I don't want to come back. I think the idea behind what Downs has done is, and what we've done throughout the project is to hit everything that's needed. This is the ceiling, and should come in under. So, second question, it appears that this project has undergone significant scope increases since its early inception. Would it be correct to categorize these as follows? So your first one was initially it addressed only remedial work needed to keep the current headquarters functioning. I would say not necessarily. I don't necessarily agree with that. Initially, we started looking at what our needs were, and they grew from there. But our first look at this project really was following, in terms of cost, the feasibility study and schematic design. So, and those cost estimates, those were our first true numbers that we had at all within this project. Your second one, since the space would go offline for remedial work, it appears a decision was made to address the additional scope of work to bring the building up to current standards with useful life of several decades. Yes, I would agree with that statement. That's what our goal was here. Third, subsequently, additional scope was added external to the building, not necessarily linked to a critical path such as the firing range, parking canopy, and the fencing. So we already spoke to that tonight. Site security was always a top priority of this project. We knew that early on, and we went through some of the reasons for that this evening already. How are the costs related to the use of the East Haven Jail being addressed? So in policing, we have a shared services agreement. That's something we do. We watch their prisoners if they have something going on there where they need some work and their cell block is down. They're going to do the same for us. We've already had those conversations. They also anticipate a major project, so we will be paying them back for the favor.
So you won't be charged.
Correct. There's be no charge there. So then last, have we developed a documented relocation plan regarding relocation of the police department functions and a critical path for its implementation? Honestly, I think number one, a lot of that involves timeline and time frame. So this is the next step in developing that plan. We have to see if we get the funding, and then from there, we'll move on. But to answer the question better than that, we've had these discussions over the last several years, like many, many, many times. Like, how are we going to do this? How is this going to look? Where are we going to go? And they're actually very easy things for us to answer. We spoke about tonight, policing, 60% of our police department is our patrol force. So they work in the field, they work in police cars. The police cars are offices. They're out on the road. A patrol officer can go out on the road and complete reporting and do 95% of their work from the road, with the exception of the prisoners. The prisoners will go to East Haven. So, that'll be an easy lift for us when we move over to the fire department.
Well, that's tonight. I'm going to go to the top of that same list, sort of out of order. So I'm a little confused, and you can maybe clarify this, or Downs can, in the estimate. They did have a list of assumptions at the beginning of the estimate, and they excluded a variety of things in their assumptions. And my question then is, where are these going to be accounted for? Was it in, they did it under soft costs at $900,000 bonus contingency? Is that where these are coming from? The list was, all computer equipment, servers, network switches, all phone systems, firing range fit out, gym equipment, commercial laundry, temporary relocation of the evidence lockers. So in your mind, are all of those things in the owner's contingency, or where do they show up in this budget if they're excluded? Let me finish with the evidence first. There were two things: the fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. They said they were excluded under assumptions, and the builder's risk insurance was excluded. But then I did see it appear to show up under soft costs. So I guess Downs could clarify that. How are you sourcing the expenses for the temporary relocation costs, such as the moves, temporary furniture, temporary IT connectivity, temporary bathrooms, overtime needed to complete moves? Again, is this also included in the owner's contingency under soft costs or not? And then the last one, from your point of view, are there any costs that you think the department will be incurring as a result of this project that don't show up in some fashion in the current estimate that Downs has put together and will show up in some other form?
So to answer that, the first question, was how these be paid for. The estimate assumptions exclude the following. So we do have 900,000 owner's soft cost contingency. That's for unknowns within the project. So that money's for unknowns. Some of these things that you had mentioned here, so all computer equipment, servers, network switches, and phone systems, that's all existing to remain. So that stuff will move with us to the fire department and will return to the police department.
So you don't have to buy anything new?
Correct. So we don't have to buy new for that. We have new computers, we have good servers, we have good computers, we have good phone systems. The phone project's getting done now as we speak, so we'll have phone systems. Our firing range outfit is mainly the same in terms of what is inside the firing range. The major costs are coming with the HVAC system there. So the gym equipment, a lot of that is new, so a lot of that's going to remain with us. That was paid for years ago from a donation that we did receive, and then also from some PBA funds. So if the officers want to buy more equipment, they'll be able to do that through the PBA funds. Not sure on the commercial laundry equipment. So yeah, and temporary relocation to evidence lockers. That's an easy lift. So our evidence is going to remain on site, and it's going to be stored inside a locked facility within the police garage at 45 Harrison Avenue, which is under surveillance. And so that there's not a huge expense there, just a trailer rental that's lockable inside the locked building, which is under surveillance. So we're in good shape there with that. The next one was the following were excluded from the Downs assumptions, but were included later under soft costs. Please clarify FF&E. But so I think we have 250,000 in there for FF&E, and I don't know if you want to. Yep. So yeah, did you see that? Yeah. So there's 250 for that in there. So it's in there.
The same thing that was actually included. Soft costs.
No, on that.
$50,000. $50,000 is allocated for builder's risk in the project costs.
So how are you sourcing the expenses for the temporary relocation of costs such as moves, temporary furniture, temporary IT connectivity, temporary bathroom facilities, overtime needed to complete the move? So temporary furniture, there's furniture, some equipment is there at the fire department that we'll need. Some of our stuff we'll be bringing with us, and the relocation costs will come out of this budget. The IT connectivity is already there, so it's plug and play at the fire department. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to go there. We'll be able to just, have all the IT connectivity that we need there. There's already security on site as well, so cameras. And in terms of like key cards for buzzing in, we can jump on the fire department system and be able to buzz in and out of the building as needed. So there's no major costs there for those things. Temporary bathroom facilities are within the project. So the overtime needs to complete the moves. I would say some overtime will have to come out of our overtime budget at times. I don't think it's a huge number, and the chief may want to step in on that.
So, John Mullen, Chief of Police, you can kind of blame me for the start of all of this. For those of you who don't know, I came here about 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years in July, this coming July. And just to recap very quickly the path of how we got here, I come here, I'm new, I get out of my car, I'm approached by an officer, nice to meet you, get to talking, and they say, when are you gonna fix the security in the back lot here? I said, well, if I can get in the front door and say, how did you get to that? So that was my first look of, okay, where I came from, same problem. I appreciate the concern about the fencing. We do want to be part of the community. However, I've experienced it as the chief of police. I've been confronted by people looking in my car, questioning me. We've had serious issues there. So security was my number one thing before I even got into the front door. Real quickly, went downstairs, and roll call, I look up, and there's some condensation on the supply vents, and I'm like, that's not right. There's some, I will term it as mold-like substance on the vent. Some of the flooring was there. So that's how the what I will call the onion started to get peeled back, and as we started peeling it back, it just started to smell worse, and that's kind of how it got there. So I went off track, but you can blame it on me because I was the kind of one who started ringing the bell. As far as the move, I'm very confident we've assembled a very good team. Unfortunately, depending how you have it, I've had the experience of doing this. I led a project in which we moved the PD, we moved dispatch, we moved prisoner detention, evidence. We're very well versed in how to do that. It's more than what our team here, very good at it. We're engaged with our radio vendor, our IT department. We had a meeting today about some ideas we were throwing around. So I'm very confident in the team we've assembled and how we do this. What I would like to share with the committee, the number one area we're looking at, the deputy properly addressed the patrol. They're out there, they're in the cars. Once we get them out there, we're not really worried about the prisoners. We have great relationships with our adjoining departments. Is mission critical, our communication system, our dispatch center. That's the first thing we look at in this project. Again, we have a great team, we have a great vendor. We're gonna be able to do that. I know it sounds, I use the word scary, of moving them or relocating them, but in practicality, the scope of this project, it's just really Cat 5 and Cat 6 wires that need to be extended into another area. So just to kind of take your level of apprehension a little bit about that. As a chief of police, what we look at is our evidence. And I'm happy to report over 3 years ago, we embarked on a process of accreditation. On top of that, I early identified the need to streamline and increase our evidence retention, tracking, chain of custody, and more importantly, disposal of our evidence. You have no idea how much we take in. Unfortunately, if you have a major case and a crime occurred, and I will use just an example of a couch, that couch has to be retained by us for the life of that case. So we have all sorts of shapes, forms, sizes of evidence. Vehicles, we have a vehicle that we're still retaining 20 plus years later that we have to retain that is actually in that gated impound. Unfortunately, when there's major crimes, those vehicles get held. So we embarked years ago on streamlining our evidence. What that entails is every item has to be looked at, every item has to be researched, We cannot destroy or get rid of any items of evidence without a court approval and/or within the state statute. I'm happy to report that after a lot of effort, they've whittled down some of the stuff that actually was in Harrison Avenue that got brought over. Statute of limitations have expired, cases are going nowhere. So they've been working for over 3 years on overtime to accomplish that. The reason why is there's only 2 or 3 people that can do that. We have very tight restrictions. We don't have access to that room. There's a property officer, an assistant property officer. There's unannounced visits. There's a whole litany of requirements. So we've been working at that for many, many years, unrelated to the building project, but to get us to higher standards. And quite frankly, you want it to be neat and clean, and you want organization. So we're all barcoded now, tracking. I have to do audits. So that part of the evidence part, we're really doing well. So the move won't be as difficult as you believe. The other thing is we clean our mess as we leave. So they touch every item. We have to track every item. We have to log every item, even when we move it as close to, say, in the back garage there. It has to be locked. So every item gets touched. What does that do? That fulfills our annual requirement of the audit and gets it out. So when we come back in, we're going to come in a nice clean space. To address the overtime issue, there will be some overtime that's built into this project, i.e. when the movers come. There's certain areas in the building that we cannot leave them alone, i.e. our records division. When evidence is moved, there will be officers that have to move that evidence. You can have them assist you in moving it, but we won't do that. We will move it with the boxes they provide, and we have a system set up for that. So there'll be minor, I don't think it's going to exceed what we've been doing already. We have to escort the movers for certain parts. As a patrol response, there's not going to be any more overtime in this project, other than at certain times when it phases, and we have to protect the front of the building. The police department's an area of safety where people come in, and we have to maintain that. So at certain times, we do that now. So whether we're paying overtime to staff, it's not going to be any different. So not going to be a lot of overtime, but there will be some built in there just to, meet the standards of the move and some of the requirements we have to do.
Thank you. So the last, sorry about I'm taking a lot of time here. The last bunch of questions I have are for Downs, Jeff.
Thank you.
So my first question is the estimate that was provided in the project documents at the heading line states that it was a 50% DD completion set that you were working with. And as Brian has said, we all know that where the real scope of the project gets finally defined is in the DD phase. So I'm assuming you've been monitoring the growth, the completion of those DD documents, but do you feel that from the 50% level that you looked at and estimated to the state of them today, has there been any creep in the scope of the project that you've noticed? I'm going to ask all the questions and go back to them after that. I did notice that you have 3 different contingencies: construction, bid escalation, and estimating, totaling 12% of the total project. So again, do you feel that if there was any creep that is covered, that those contingencies cover that change in the project? As we've talked about before, there was this $900,000 owner's soft cost contingency, and I think we've sort of talked this out, but I'm assuming that either in that or in other areas of the soft costs, that all of the move, relocation costs, extraneous costs of the projects will be picked up and covered in this. You did, I think I have the answer to this, but you did, under your assumptions, you noted that there was a $1,771,000 cost for the canopy. It was included in that under the assumptions, and under the proposed alternate deducts, you showed that same amount being deducted as a possible deduction, which I don't think the department wants to do, but if it were done, you show it there. But I didn't see it, actually a line item for that anywhere in the actual project estimate, so I'm assuming, and you can just clarify that the canopy is actually broken down into individual trade line items, and it isn't, you have included it, that cost in your estimate. You also state that premiums for non-standard work times have been excluded in the estimates, and so my question is, do you anticipate any of those based on the fact that this is an occupied-based construction project? You also state under your inclusion, your estimates, that all hazardous materials are excluded, including demolition and hazardous material noted on drawing D 1.1. I'm not sure exactly what was on that drawing, but you've excluded it. And then my question is, do you know of any hazardous materials that need remediation? And if so, are those costs at this point covered in the estimate? Next to last question is, I think we verified this, but you're doing a CM not to exceed contract, which sort of caps the cost in the end. And I asked when you intend to go to bid. I think that's already been answered. So that's my final list of questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So in terms of the first question, the estimate that we have presented this evening to you is considered the design development estimate. So what that equates to in layman's terms is the 50% completion mark as it relates to drawing completion. So our estimate is based on that set of drawings. We have not seen another set of drawings since then. So we feel that the budget that we have this evening best represents the scope of work that's shown on those drawings. And the contingencies that we have, both on the hard cost side and certainly as we've been involved with on the soft cost side, which are some of your other questions coming up here, are relatively industry standard from a percentage-based standpoint at this level of drawing completion, and are there to handle changes in scope. And I can tell, of course, that you were in the industry by using the technical term creep, which we use day in and day out. But that's what the purpose of those contingencies is. So leading into your third question, yes, we have a construction contingency that will always remain there as part of our eventual guaranteed maximum price. We have escalation still built in, really candidly, to deal with the time frame that we're in right now, from the time that we completed this last estimate till we ultimately receive approval, hopefully again after this evening, and then Brian moves forward with drawings. So that.
As with all these contingencies, I assume that if they're in fact not completely utilized, that then that reduces your final cost, that you don't capture contingency amounts.
Right. The only contingency that remains fixed at the time of our eventual guaranteed maximum price is our construction contingency. The bid escalation and the design and estimated contingency are either not spent or they're partially absorbed or fully absorbed within the trade cost total. So the total becomes the result of the trade package bids and all of the other line items that are associated with our GMP. I mentioned those briefly earlier. Our contingency, our staffing and general conditions, insurance costs, bond costs. So they are just to offset the likelihood of changes to the drawings, things that we either did not contemplate in the estimate or were not clearly shown in the drawings but are absorbed by those contingencies as we move forward with the final set of documents. So to answer your question, yes, we feel based on our experience in these types of buildings that is intended and will cover accretive as we move forward. So the soft cost as developed on this project, we have some involvement with that. We certainly have been working closely with the deputy chief to develop the off-site plan as it is conceptualized now, the phasing plan for the actual PD. But the majority of those soft costs are established in part by Brian Humes and his experience in doing these types of facilities. So that owner's soft cost contingency is a value that's applied to all of your soft costs and our hard costs. So eventually that soft cost contingency will become a fixed amount as we go through our guaranteed maximum price. So if there are unforeseen conditions that we encounter that could not have been contemplated in the original drawings, as an example, that's what would come from that contingency. If there's additional expenses associated with soft cost items, that would come from that contingency down the line. So it's a broad allocation of contingency monies to handle owner-related changes, either on the soft cost side or the construction side as we move forward. The assumptions state an allowance for $1,071,000 associated with the canopy. So the canopy structure is in the base bid. It's within multiple line items, primarily within the special construction line item that is on the general summary that was part of your packet. There's also additional monies associated with constructing that canopy in the concrete and the site work for putting in the footings that support that canopy. So, but it is in the project total budget in the hard cost total.
And I was told that that canopy is solar ready.
It is.
Designed to be solar ready.
That's correct.
Can you repeat that?
The carport canopy is designed for future photovoltaic panels on the roof of the carport.
Thank you.
Future.
Yeah, future.
Why future?
The town has to enter into some contract to supply and install those, and you get a rebate. It's not something that general contractor applies.
Okay.
The town would enter into an agreement.
With it. Okay.
Okay, the next question that you had, sir, was the premiums for non-standard work time have been excluded. So a relatively standard exclusion that we put in, but as it relates to what is going to be required for off hours to accomplish this project, it will be within the project cost and it's contemplated to a certain level. But we have not figured, as an example, to do everything off hours, right? That's why we've worked with the two chiefs to make sure that we can accomplish this in a phased manner, the majority of which will be in normal working hours, 7 a.m. to 3:30 approximately, Monday through Friday. Okay, the next question was in regards to hazardous materials are excluded. We are not aware of any hazardous materials within the building. It is a 1994 building, which is typically after the concerns of asbestos and those types of things. So that's why we had that exclusion. We're not aware of it.
There has been testing. Testing has not found and identified any, but when you open things up, it may be a contingency, but none has been identified.
Can I just ask a clarifying on that one? Mold, black mold, I mean, that was part of what we were shown in the, we didn't even need to be shown it. It was right there. Not considered hazmat.
No, hazmat for those purposes would be asbestos.
Asbestos, lead, I get it, but black mold not? Biological materials not?
And lead paint would be similar to black mold. It's an OSHA requirement for handling and disposal. So contractors would be made aware and proper safety precautions would have to be undertaken. Disposal would have to be controlled. But lead paint,
because we know that mold is there.
So we, just to
thank you.
Add to the record, we did engage a vendor to come in and clean those vents. Every vent was cleaned, all the ductwork was inspected and cleaned also. And we did that on a, I wouldn't say routine basis, but on a frequent basis. We did hire a company to come in, and it was done not too long ago. And there's no persistent evidence or anything on those vents right now. But in July, when you go to, if we did a tour in July, it literally will be, the moisture will be falling off those because of the moisture content coming up in there. So we did remedy that as best we could, but what causes mold? Moisture, water, and we don't get rid of that to continue, that's going to come back again.
And the next question again was, will we be including a guaranteed not to exceed? Yes, as I mentioned earlier, it's called a guaranteed maximum price amendment to our existing agreement that we have with the town of Branford. And when do we go to bid? I talked about that earlier, so approximately, hopefully 3 months from this evening.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Representative Amore.
Sorry, come forward. I have two brief questions. One was answered already. I know that there's talk about green qualities to this renovation, and I was wondering about is there any other part of this project that is going to be using renewable energy sources? And you answered part of it, but is there any other plan for that within the project as it's specified now?
Yeah, you guys were asking about that too.
Oh, sorry.
Through the town engineer, and I think also through the building committee, there's always been an interest in the level of sustainability that can be applied to the project. The cost of the project that you see tonight is for more efficient mechanical systems, more efficient lighting systems, but could we go beyond that? It's something that the town is considering. They've been in contact with Eversource. They have a consultant that they've retained to look at life cycle costs of additional sustainable items. One of the drawbacks on achieving some of that is we have an existing building. It would be much easier to accomplish some of those objectives if we had a new construction where then you can dictate our values and envelope. With the existing building, I think we can only achieve so much, but the town engineer is looking at anything additional that can be applied to the project. And if it could be, what are the costs and what are the paybacks?
One last question. I had the pleasure of sitting in a number of meetings with Down Construction when I was on the board of the library. And of course, I really didn't understand what I was hearing most of the time, but I appreciate the work you did for the library, truly, truly. So I was able to experience those meetings, and I'm wondering what will be the project oversight structure if the project goes forward? Who will be in the equivalent of those construction oversight meetings that I sat in on?
As we move towards construction after the execution of the guaranteed maximum price that I've talked about, Brad next to me is Senior Project Manager for Downs Construction, actually a resident of North Branford, so not very far from here. Will be involved with the owner, architect, construction manager meetings that will likely be at least every 2 weeks. We imagine, of course, that as is typical, Brian Humes and his assigned architectural team will be part of those meetings. We'll also likely have a project engineer, assistant project manager for Downs Construction attending those meetings, and we would expect also that the building committee and representatives of the police department will be involved with those meetings. But the structure of those meetings have yet to be established, because again, tonight we're really at that 50% level, and that'll start to materialize again, hoping after approval this evening.
So, just one last comment.
Sure.
So, do you mean the building commission?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say I really appreciate the level of specificity that's gone on here tonight. Thank you.
A quick remark before I call on Representative Everson. What we're doing today, I hope, is an extraordinarily thorough, impartial, bipartisan discussion of this to recommend it to the RTM. So the RTM, I think, next week will be voting on it on the 13th. Right. Just expectation management. Representative Everson.
On this stand here, we've heard an extensive presentation tonight, far more in detail than I have ever heard before about this project. So I really appreciate the time and attention and the questions that you've been sitting here and patiently answering. And Peter Henschel is an architect, retired in the business, so a lot of his questions are very pointed. But my question is, we've heard a lot about the building. One thing that doesn't seem to be solved here is the public parking for the police station. And I'm wondering if that is something that has been considered at all with Laurel Street, and one of those houses is for sale. You know, could we purchase the houses, expand the parking lot to make public access to the building better? Was that looked at all?
So I know you had mentioned that, not sure if we're still on, there we go. We have not specifically looked to buy any other property in town as, you know, police officers. We do have enough parking for our operational needs as it stands right now. And then part of this design, so the, you know, a lot of, like we had spoken earlier, some of our parking is taken up by the public who at times gets into our lot and has left vehicles there for long term. The Volunteer Services Center will then also get the entire south side of that building for themselves. Oftentimes they take up some level of parking within the back parking lot. And we also take parking on the south side of that building during our daily operations as police officers. When there's no parking, we need to overflow back there. So with the reallocation of space, there will be enough parking for our daily needs. I think the parking situation in the center is a different conversation for a different time in terms of land acquisition for public parking. I mean, we all know it's definitely busy in the center, and there's not a lot of spaces at times. And you know, I don't know who can answer that question in terms of buying property to utilize it as parking, but yeah, that won't be me.
Can I ask a clarifying? So I just want to ask a clarifying. There's about, what, 4 spots there between 2 non-handicapped and 2. Will there be more spots?
Yes.
For the.
Yes, we are increasing the level of public parking.
Thank you.
And another major part that's answered here is the parking is at the front of the building for the public where it needs to be.
Yeah.
I see elderly people walking our hill daily because they are forced to park in the back parking lot and walk up the hill to get in because we don't have enough parking at the front right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Representative Black? You wanted to make a remark?
Yeah, I just to follow up on Representative Bonneberger, Chairman Bonneberger's expectations for our processes. Like I say, as he said, we're making a recommendation here. Our full legislative body will meet in a week on the 13th to approve it. After that, under our charter, it's still in limbo for another 15 days and subject to referendum. And so Jim Finch can't legally start writing checks or issuing bonds until, you know, essentially the end of March. You know, whether you want to take that on faith, somebody's got to collect, last time I calculated it, about 3,000 signatures in order to ask for a referendum on it. But, you know, as far as the check writing, I know Jim is aware of that. So, you know, whether you want to run off the cliff like the road runner and assume that we're going to build that bridge, which is likely, you can do that.
Well, contractually, we've completed our contract with the town.
Yeah.
And we also need to be re-engaged at the appropriate time to start the clock moving. So we've anticipated 12 weeks from whenever we're given the go-ahead. And that'll start the clock. But understood. And I have it on my calendar to be in attendance next Wednesday. Also, if there are any additional questions, we're obviously not intending to do this type of presentation. But if there are any other comments, I will be in attendance.
Last call on questions from RTM members in attendance.
Not RTM member, just a resident.
Stand by.
Thank you.
It's almost your turn. Ex officio members in attendance. Select people. Comments, questions? Audience members, non-RTM, selectmen. Sir, in the back. Please state your name also.
I think I could talk over.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's what we can teach you there. Save some time. So this is in regard to the architectural plans. Oh, my name is Nick Kyra Devlin, resident Branford. I live at 2 Oak Hollow Road. So my question is, how far does the locker room extend underneath that front area?
If you see the front of the front elevation of the building, it comes across, it jogs back, and then it jogs forward again on the left-hand side. What happens on the lower level is the foundation wall continues straight across. So where that front elevation recesses, downstairs the locker room does not.
Makes sense. So there's not going to be the parking plans that you that you proposed. That will not be above
It will
the
not.
structural.
No.
So
It's just pedestrian area.
Just pedestrian area. So,
Yeah.
but you will make sure that that whole area in the front is remediated, so there's no additional water going down into that basement area.
That is correct. That's part of the scope of the project.
Okay. And then my question is to follow up on the parking. I think that for that the carport, it's a great proposed plan, but how many spaces is that gonna occupy? And have you thought to do maybe an additional, like, larger parking structure to exceed the needs that might exist 20 to 30 years? I know you talked about the space needs assessment, but like 20 million is a great amount of money, but could you put a parking structure there instead to maximize parking space, have a more gated area for patrol cars, like those sorts of things? I don't think that really like encompasses that. And the up and down levers, are they gonna be key card access, or is it just gonna be automatic?
There's a carport for 16 vehicles being proposed. If there's any additional structure for parking, the land area is too small to make an efficient parking structure. You need to increase the land area to make it efficient for ramps and for parking. So it just doesn't make sense. You can cover the whole lot, but you can't deck the lot. 16 seemed to be the number that would satisfy fleet vehicles, and this carport shelter is only for fleet vehicles. It's not really for public convenience for the staff. It's just to protect the equipment and the vehicles for the fleet, the patrol cars. So 16 was the number that was adequate also into the future. And what's the last question I missed?
The gate, is it going to be
The
key card
gate.
access?
The gate has a credential is needed to get through the gate. Now the credential on the fleet vehicles is a tag. It's like an easy pass. So all of the vehicles would have that credential. They can also distribute those credentials to staff. And staff could have an easy pass. For a better word, it's an easy pass type of credential. So they could transfer that from vehicle to vehicle for staff to come in and out. If there is anybody wishing to get through that gate that does not have the credential, there is also an intercom, and that intercom goes dispatch. Dispatch has the ability to open the gate.
Other questions from audience members?
Yep.
Sir, same thing, just state your name, address.
Okay.
Josh Marshall, 186 Damascus Road. Brian Humes, thank you for giving what amounted to an over 100-page report verbally. You have this all in your head. What were some of the design predicates given to you? Because when I was listening to this, it was quite apparent that you were given design constraints, but I never really got to hear what all of them were.
You want to answer one at a time?
I have quite a few, so.
Okay. Before we even looked at the building for what we could do with the building, as I said, we had to develop the space needs. So the space needs determined what I needed to put into the building. And I look at these as puzzle pieces. So we've developed the space needs assessment, which is multiple pages long, concluding, it's 25 pages of not just the need for a program, but it also gives the requirement for the program and the adjacencies for the program. It's 25 pages detailed of what each room needs. Those are my puzzle pieces. Then I applied those puzzle pieces to the existing floor plan. Some of the puzzle pieces were similar, some of them were very dissimilar. So we had to reconfigure the building to its greatest potential with these new established puzzle pieces.
Now, amongst those predicates, some of those I was thinking like other physical spaces, other plots of land. One that struck out to me is, why not buy an adjoining property?
Well, the building needs improvements. I think the town is in a position that also wants to preserve its assets. And there are assets on this site. There's the asset just for the location, but the deputy chief also, there's an extensive communication network that the town has invested in with towers and antennas, radio communications. Those are assets that if the building was to move, if the building was to relocate, everything has to go with it.
Right, I said an adjoining property.
What we are proposing now seems to satisfy, it does satisfy the space needs and site needs of the department. So we have not explored any other land adjacencies for acquisition.
Just relocate the basement.
And we have looked at alternatives. This is still the project we're recommending.
Okay, so moving on. One thing that I was trying to dig up is that this project was started moving in about 2021, 2022, correct?
Right.
There's not a consolidated location of documents or a master document. So there is no place for me as a resident to go for an authoritative source of information. When I was digging around today, there was no way for me to find out everything that was actually going on. So this is really a insular piece of information that I can't peer into what my city's doing. And for that reason alone, I can't find, for a public information reason, I can't justify this project moving forward.
So, sir, just to clarify really quickly, these documents were, and I know because I had to collect them myself, they were sent to the town clerk and they were published before the meeting online. All of the documents we've all got.
I found many of them,
okay,
but they're not comprehensive.
I think, again, not to put words in your mouths, but what they were saying is this is what we've got right now. The rest of the documents are going to be forthcoming. That's the 50% thing you keep talking about, right? So this is what we've got to work with.
And a couple other things that I could speak to, just being a part of the project. So over the last few years, there's been a lot of oversight on the project. So there's Board of Finance oversight, there's Public Building Commission oversight, there's RTM oversight now at this point, Police Commission oversight, and within all those commissions in town, there's agendas and there's minutes. So all the minutes have been posted, and what we try to do on the police department side, every commission meeting was we gave a building update, a building project update. So we've been doing that for several years now. So within,
and they're scattered.
Right, so you have to go to the town website, look at the agendas and minutes, and then, you know, find the minutes. And if you look through the minutes, you can keep up with the project and where it's at, and we've given updates. It is difficult, I understand that. But, you know, that's the purpose of these forums, and that's why, you know, the people that you vote for represent you, and, you know, they have your interests and the town's interests at mind, and that's why we're here, with different viewpoints and, you know, discussing the project.
Right. I do consider the lack of a consolidated location of documents and relevant information for $20 million an administrative failure. Now, these are significant failures that are happening within the building, and they do have to be addressed. Where is the information that is saying how much this is costing us year over year by not addressing?
Take that one. So it's hard to say, you know, exactly what the cost of escalation will be year after year if we don't address these problems. I think that we showed that there's a lot of issues within the building. We've documented that well. The fact of the matter is, I mean, if we all could have seen COVID coming and done this project pre-COVID in 2019, I bet you every person in this room would have said, yeah, let's do it then. And we don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. So you could wait. One major concern of waiting is that there are significant liabilities within that building, and we've discussed those tonight already and in detail.
Yeah, there are major risks, but it's a lot of money. That is a major, and I'd say pivotal piece of information to weigh when approving this. Without that, how can we justify it? And I understand that this is important and at some point must be approved. But it is important for that will dictate necessarily when it gets approved. I'm also frustrated by the town clerk. The scans of the PowerPoint.
Sir, not trying to cut you off or anything else like that here, but I just please limit this to questions, and it's not really a debate. It's just if you have additional questions or comments.
There are many. When for the female locker room, when is it projected to run out of space for police officers?
So I have 2 lockers left for female.
Okay, so it could happen in
this
a year.
cycle, sure, yes.
Okay. You said that there's a physical fitness space that's needed. Call me ignorant on this. Why is a gym membership not appropriate?
I think just costs associated with a gym membership would be extremely high on an annual basis. The town would have to incur that cost. to keep it going for 52 people. I mean, you know, I'm sure there's areas where that's done. We have enough space for the gym that we have. The officers enjoy the gym, they utilize the gym. So it's, you know, health and wellness is very important in policing right now. And yeah, the space there is adequate. We want to continue to use it, and we don't need a gym membership for that. They only use the gym in their off-duty time.
Okay, but this would be another area where numbers would be helpful.
It'd probably be more expensive to get gym memberships long-term for the officers as opposed to just, you know, renovating that space.
It being long-term more expensive may absolutely be the case, but I don't see the argument here for that. That information is missing. Similar for additional workstation needs. There's missing statistics. There's missing data that is saying that these are coming up. I believe that you have this in the back end somewhere, but this has not been given to us. And that's everything I have.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Any other questions from the audience? Representative Brooks.
So we made a motion earlier.
We did.
We made a motion earlier to approve this. If I'm being honest, when I came to this meeting, because it's such a large amount of money, I can't say that I didn't have in my mind the possibility of re-referring this back to committee for more questions. I've been on the RTM now for, I don't know, a lot of years, too many years. My wife will tell you way too many years. But I've never gotten so much information out of one meeting. I love to write down questions. It's my favorite thing to do. And yet I can't figure out any questions to write down. So I will rise in support to recommend approval to the full RTM next Wednesday.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Black.
I mean, there is a motion on, so it's just basically restated the motion that he made 2 hours ago.
Yes.
But I will move to move the question.
All right, let's do it.
I'm going to vote no to move the question. I just want to get the vote. But you
Are we
move the
doing-
question.
Are we doing separate committees again, or just all one?
For the final vote, yes, we have to do separate committees, yes.
But to move the question, you can do with one.
Yeah, if there's a second, or else.
Somebody's got a second that.
I second.
Gina did.
Seconded.
I did.
All right, so would you like to go first or shall we?
No. You're
No, we
voting
have
on
to
moving
vote
the
on the
question,
question.
meaning no more discussion. He just made a motion to move the question, so that's the vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All
I'm
opposed?
Aye. I'm never
Any
in favor of moving
abstentions?
the question.
It passes.
Fair enough.
And now?
We have the
The original motion on the floor was made by Representative Brooks and was seconded by Representative Hines. We need to take separate votes in the two committees because we have Ways and Means here and we also have Public Services here. So in Ways and Means, where I'm the chair, I will call. We don't need to do this by roll call. We'll simply do it by voice vote. All those in favor in Ways and Means of recommending to the RTM that we go forward with this proposal, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So for Ways and Means, it carries 5-0. Thank you.
All those in favor in Public Services for recommending that this goes forward?
Need a motion on your side.
Motion, do I hear a motion on my side to
Make a motion to vote on the.
recommend this for
Recommend.
approval?
Probably second.
Seconded.
Wait, which one of you is going to second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm also in favor. Any abstentions? The motion passes 6-0. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
I'll make that motion.
Seconded. We are adjourned.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.